Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of our podcast series, Chaiyya Chats. My name is Ruben Thomas, and I'm joined here today with Reverend Father Matt Alexander. Matt Utchin has been the youth minister of the Dallas area for the past 12 years. We are very happy and blessed to have Utchin here with us today. Thank you, Utchin.
It's awesome.
So the topic that we wanted to start off this podcast series with is family pressures, and more specifically, parental pressures. We all know that growing up in a Malayali family, we're surrounded by many different pressures, and that they only intensify once we reach college. And I know, Madachin, this is a topic that's very important to you, and that you felt that we should be talking about this. So what are your thoughts on this topic, and why did you think it was necessary to start off with this specific topic?
Yeah, I think it's a really great topic. I think it's an awesome thing that you're doing the podcast and such. I was with the Bible study a little bit of time ago, and I remember asking the kids if where do you get more pressure, from school or from your parents about school? And the kids were like, oh, clearly from parents about school. And I think it's part of our culture. It's something that we stress education a lot in our culture, and that's a really good thing. And that's part of who we are. But that, education is important. Once you have an education, you have a ability to do things. The problem is that pressure can be really overwhelming sometimes, and crippling for a lot of kids and people growing up. And then that can make it difficult. It's when is adding pressure too much? Stressing education is important, but without it being like everything.
Right. So, you're talking about pressures, especially relating to education. Mm-hmm. I would say for most of our college students today, if they are feeling pressure to do well in school or to have degrees that will give them good careers, it seems like that pressure already has started even before they've started college, right?
Yeah.
You see, they've been dealing with it for a while, right?
Yeah.
You would say.
Yeah, from a young age, we really we stress that, and it becomes a lot about sometimes about the grade, about bringing home the right grades, and it's an important thing. But part of the problem is if it's always about the grade, then how I get the grade becomes less important, and we focus in on that as opposed to the learning. And learning really should be the thing we're stressing the most, is of growing and learning, having a love for learning. If it's always about the grade, that's where people will start to cheat to get ahead. Because it's whatever I need to do to bring home the right grade, to impress that, hey, look, this is, and then not only that, it's the grade becomes part of your self-worth, and people kind of grade themselves based on things like that, and that we can't do that. Sometimes the grade's going to go your way, sometimes it's not. But the most important thing is the learning, and the grade should just reflect the learning. We have to cultivate a love for learning, and when you do that, the grades come automatically. When you do that, then it becomes something of that thirst for knowledge, of growth, of true growth, of finding things that, and instead of living for otherwise people always have live with a lot of disappointment. It's never enough. It's never enough. It's always 99. It's not 100. And that is a pressure that you can never really live up to anything. So.
And that brings up a good point of having a thirst for knowledge. I think, especially when we're starting as kids, I think we get pushed just to do well, just for the sake of the number. Even if you come home with the 89, you're always going to get asked, why not an A? And even if you came back with 97, you're going to get asked, what happened to those 3 points? Yeah. Right? It almost seems like it's never enough unless it's perfect. And like you said, I think it comes from a good place. Yeah. From our parents, right? They want us to succeed, to do well, and maybe to have more than they grew up with. And yeah. They see the grades leading to a better education, to a better career, more stability, being that path.
Yeah. I think that's a key point that you just said there. A lot of it is, it comes from a good place, because most parents don't want their kids to struggle like they struggled. They want them to have somewhat of an easier life, for lack of a better term. And they want them to do well, and they know that with an education, with skills, you have options and such, and so it comes from a good place. Parents are loving and wonderful people, and that's part of it. It's just a matter of how this comes out, and where things go from there, because it ends up being, like you said, the grade. When we're working, if you're constantly trying to live up to your parents' expectations, you're always going to be living in disappointment, because the best that you can do is, you're never going to get perfect in that sense, and you're always going to be coming up short, whether it be 99, 98, not as a grade, but just trying to live up to that. It'll never be perfect in that sense. And then, but the opposite's there. If you're turned towards God and His dreams and His expectations of you, we start to move in a place where you're exceeding, living outside of what your parents' expectations are, and that's where things start to get, where you start to find real satisfaction on things, because it's not about somebody else. It's about living your calling.
Right. And if you always spend most of your time and effort thinking of whether you're going to live up to your parents' expectations, I can imagine that goes past college as well, right? Whatever happens in your life afterwards.
Yeah.
I think
there are a lot of adults out there who are still trying to live up to the expectations of sometimes even people who've already passed away, and that's hard. It's a crippling weight to bear.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you said was important too, with, I think, making it your own. I mean, like school, at a very young age, we're disciplined severely if we don't do well, and it's almost as if we have to do well to avoid any type of punishment. But I feel like at a certain age, we also, like you said, understand that this is something important for us. But when we understand that, and then we're still faced with the pressures and your parents calling you up and wondering what's going on, maybe at a younger age that might have motivated us to do well. But I feel like in college that none of that really motivates you anymore, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, fear will only take you so far, right? And
right.
So if anything based on fear, having to do things out of fear, it'll take you so far, but it won't take you the distance. It won't, when things get tough, it's not going to take you there. But again, if you cultivate a love for learning, you cultivate a love for things, then that's where you start to grow. That's where you pick up the book, not just when you have to. When you get the assignment, not procrastinating, waiting for the last second because I have to do it. It's the curiosity of, I want to know how this works. I want to understand this, and diving in. And that moves even beyond your schooling, because after you finish, you'll still have that thirst for knowledge. You'll still want to grow. You'll still want to read it. You'll still want to learn. And that's lifetime of growth. And you'll see that, whatever career anybody chooses, they'll continue to grow because they have a passion for it. It's not simply out of fear and obligation that they do everything. Now, there are times where things that we, are just genuinely not interested in. There's going to be subjects that you're not interested in school. There's going to be things that, and that's okay too. That's hard. It can't always be things that you love, but we have to learn all the blocks, the basic, to build a foundation. We have to have a general knowledge of all things, and then build up from there. And that's part of it. But if we're picking a career, we're always struggling to kind of find motivation to read and do things. Maybe we need to rethink that, what we're doing.
Right, and I guess that's a good transition to just careers overall. Mm-hmm. Personally, I think we've seen a lot of parents push our kids towards certain fields, towards certain degrees. Like for myself, right when I was starting high school applications for college, I was told, be an engineer, doctor, or lawyer. Any one of those is great. And that wasn't said in a way that everything else is terrible, but that, there are certain fields that have good stability, good compensation, right? It sets you up well for the future. And I think that, and it ended up working well for me too, being an engineer now, right? But I can say that a lot of times I think there is a push towards certain degrees that maybe we aren't so into. Maybe it's not our passion. But I also feel it's difficult for us, I think, sometimes with our parents, pressure for us to verbalize that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, have you seen that in your experience?
Yeah, I think, especially in the previous generations and things like that. Like you said, doctor, lawyer, engineer. Like if you weren't that, the world was over. Like, oh, my child's a failure, or things like that would happen, and that's not as much the case anymore, I think. But I think part of that is, when you look at how people grew up in India and such, it kind of comes out that way. Unless you have, you score well on your exams and 10 standard and things like that, and you move on, and it's like you're able to go to an engineering school or to a medical school. And those are seen as, those are professions that could really make a difference for the family and such. But the difference is here in this country, the United States, it is a land of opportunity. You could do pretty much anything here, and do well with it. And that's the beauty of this country, and why people call it the land of opportunity. It's a wonderful thing. It's a blessed thing. That we're able to do that, and it's a beautiful thing to see people nowadays. You can see, I see people who grow up and who have a passion for something, and they've made careers out of so many things, and that's awesome. It's wonderful to see people thrive, and so we have to think about, what am I, what do I love to do, but then also what am I good at?
Right.
I might enjoy basketball, but I'm not going to be an NBA player, and that's okay. But I can have a love of basketball, and there's so many careers that you can do related to that. But at the same time, we also have to think about our strengths and such, and things that we enjoy. Sometimes we have, there might be things that we're interested in that are not our strength, but we, because of our interest in it, we can make them our strength just because out of that passion for what we do.
Right. And I would say it's great always finding what you're passionate about. But I think some people are faced with that difficult time of approaching it with their parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want any type of conversation like that to devolve into just a yelling match back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which at sometimes it may end up being that way. And so what do you think is the best way to approach those types of conversations with parents so that everybody can move forward? At this time, we're all learning how to be young adults in this world, right? And I feel like also at that point, the relationship should also change. I know we're not as advanced or experienced as they are, but I think we can also move on from just, I told you to do this because I said so. I think both sides can grow from it, but I feel like we also have to learn in our own way how to approach our parents differently than maybe we would have before.
Yeah, it's a tough conversation to have. It is sometimes when we make a change in a career or a path, and or something that may be outside of the realm. I think the fundamental thing is to try and see things from the other person's perspective. So if you can, your parents love their kids, they care for them, they want the best for them, and that's why they want to steer them in a certain direction and things like that, the way that they think that would be best. And it's just hard to you have to understand that that's coming from a place of love, but at the same time you can sit down and talk and say, and share your feelings and say, this is where things, people aren't going to listen when you yell, or you forsake them. We have to approach all of our elders and our parents with respect. And they've sacrificed a lot for us. A lot of them came to this country and sacrificed a lot to give their kids an opportunity for a better life, and for the sake of their family and such. But at the same time, we still have to also follow our heart, and you sit down and share that with them and talk to them about that. It may not happen all in one conversation, but you say, I know you love me, I know you care about me, I know that this is this, and I do. I want to say, and you have to put some thought into it. It just can't be, I don't want to do this, but you have to have sat down and thought about, what do you do? I think everybody going to college should sit down for a few hours with their course book, the entire course book of their school, and just look through all the classes, like read through it, the entire thing, and just, highlight all the courses that they find interesting. And if you're going through and you're highlighting and you're figuring all that stuff, and the major you're choosing, you've highlighted 2 or 3 classes, that's not a good sign. You got to find something that you find genuine interest in. Not all of them, but something that's there. I think that's a few hours well spent, where we unplug and do that instead of just jumping in and just going with kind of and running something that's preset. But we should think these out. Or you go in for an internship and figure out, is this something? You have to put the work in. You have to go and shadow somebody, somebody in the church or somebody who has that kind of a career. Ask if you can follow them around for a few days or talk to them or sit down and have some coffee and ask what this career is like. And once we get a taste of it, then we'll know. Or volunteer. If you want to go and work in the hospital in some way, go volunteer. There's so many opportunities to do that and get a taste of that. And better to do it now instead of after graduation.
Right. And I think that's important to highlight the effort that it takes to, because up until college, your education is set for you, until it becomes your own after you graduate high school. And I think also if your parents see that effort and you come to them with a sincere heart and just genuinely wanting to talk about your future, I think for the most part, after a certain time when they see that effort from you, and I think there's a two-way trust that begins to form.
Yeah.
Well, at least what I've seen personally from my own relationship, right? As you get older, and they see you making that effort and they see that you really care about this, if you're able to have that conversation without just going off the deep end from the beginning, without going too far down the emotional side of it.
Yeah.
Right.
It shows maturity. It shows that you've thought through things. And they're more likely to take that seriously. They're more likely to listen. And I think that that's the better route once you're showing your genuine interests. And part of that is, growing up and figuring out how to relate in a respectful manner. And it's okay for sometimes people to have a difference of opinion. You should value their advice. You should value their concerns. They might have concerns, and we have to take that to heart. Whether it be parents, whether it be family members, whether it be people, mentors, or we should listen and take all the advice in so that we can make the best decisions we possibly can in a given situation. Sometimes it's going to be mistakes, and that's okay. Sometimes we fall, we get scratched up, and then we get up and we go again. Better to have tried something and failed than to have not tried at all, right?
Right.
So.
This is a good point. And I think maybe to address something earlier as well, as part of the pressures that we have going through college, I know a big one for our college students today is when they're constantly being compared to other people, right, to other students, whether it's their siblings or family friends whose kids are also in college. I think our parents might have a bad habit sometimes of comparing us. And again, it comes from a good place of wanting to see us succeed, right? But I feel like you've probably seen that a lot.
Yeah, it's a big part of our culture, right? We're always, why can't you be like that kid? Why can't you be like this? And you're like, and most kids are like, I hate that kid because you're constantly compared. You can never live up to it, right? And then that's tough. It's really tough. Whether it be it causes sibling rivalry, it causes things like that. And so much of our culture is based on competition. Like we do everything as a competition, and unfortunately, it kind of breeds this culture. And sometimes I guess maybe parents feel the need to kind of like that their kids are like society's grade on them, right?
Right.
And so they feel like they're just trying to keep up and put this image forward to maintain kind of a social standing, and that's tough. It shows a lot of their own hurt that they felt throughout their life, and it just kind of keeps moving from generation to generation, this comparing. And we have to step out of that. We have to step out of this comparison. Everybody's different, everybody's unique, and we have to celebrate that. That's a wonderful thing. We can't compare ourselves or measure ourselves against other people. We should celebrate other people's success and victory with that in a way that does not demean anybody else around them. I find that a lot when it comes to when people give compliments on anything. They tend to say something bad about other things in order to build up others. This year's OVBS was the best ever. We don't need to say that. We don't need to compare it to all the others that came before. you could just say, this was an awesome OVBS.
Right.
I really enjoyed it. And it would have more of an impact if you said it the second way versus the first. There's no need to drag down other things in order to build up. But it's something that you find in our casual conversations all the time. Oh,
Right.
that was the best program ever. That was the best dance ever. You're the smartest kid ever. You're like, well, no, I mean, there's no need for that.
Right.
Because even the person receiving the compliment also doesn't feel that way, that they're oftentimes better in that sense as well. But I think that's part of it, and it doesn't add to anything. If anything, I think it does the opposite. Liz is kind of like this. Oh, I'm not good enough. I can't. I'm not. When somebody is constantly being compared, when they approach something that's hard, the thought comes in. I can't. I'm not able. I'm not like that person who could do this, and so they don't even try, and that's where it gets tough. And so once we move out of that, you'll find that it does the opposite of what you want it to do. When you compare, it takes away people's confidence. It takes away their courage. But if you step out of that, you'll find, I think, people build up confidence. They build up that risk taking, that courage to do other things, and or to approach any struggle whenever they rise to meet the occasion that's ahead of them, if they have that confidence. And so the goal is to build up that confidence, that no matter what comes, and that they'll be able to rise towards that.
Right. I think that's important, like not letting it affect yourself personally, because there's a lot of times where, like you said, it affects your self-esteem, right, or your feelings of self-worth, right. And I think more so than if it was just your friends saying it, or if it was just your classmates saying that, you're not really the best at this. I think when you hear it from your family, that really does hurt a lot more. But you wouldn't care if it was a stranger saying those things to you. And it's interesting, right? I think maybe it's that expectation that, of all the people in the world, your family is the one who should support you the most. And I think at those tough times, especially when you're dealing with the struggles that school has, along with, with the classes and then the other organizations you're in and the rest of your life, then you feel like you really need people in your corner, right? And I think at sometimes you might feel, if you're getting that pressure, you're not really getting that support, and that's, I think, what hurts a lot of people the most, right? Hearing it from them.
You want, like you said, you want to have your family in your corner, supporting you, cheering you on, not saying like, why can't you be more like that guy?
Right.
You're never going to see that in a sport game, right? Like in the middle of a basketball game, you're not going to see like parents in the sideline being like, run like that guy. Not going to happen. What are you going to do? Right? Why can't you do that? I mean, you want to cheer them on. You want to encourage. You want to build up. And I think, if you're having a lot of comparisons, it's good to just sit down with the person and say, I know you mean well, but it's actually, it'd be better if you kind of said it this way. I wish you would. And in a gentle way, in a calm way, not when you're really upset about it. But I think that would help kind of change the dialogue of things. But like you said, if you're trying to live towards other people's expectations, you're going to always live with a lot of disappointment. You're always going to live with a lot of struggle.
So I think like another point to that would be, like you said, having the self-confidence, right? To not let those things affect you, right? It's almost getting to the point where what other people say, especially maybe your family, maybe your parents, you come to a point where it doesn't bring you down, right? But I think it's very hard to get to that point, right? To say it doesn't matter what they're saying if I'm able to achieve these things, right?
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of you. It only matters what God thinks of you and what you think of you. As long as you can live for that and live for the plan that God has for you, and He's given you talents, and you have to do something with those things. And in the sense of, we shouldn't. I don't make this to sound like you don't have to put the work in and do these things. There are challenges, there are things that you're gonna have to rise to. But God has designed everybody unique, and we all we have a different kind of paths and things that we take, and but you have to sit and go to God in prayer and talk to Him about all these things, and that frustration can bring those things there as well. But and then you discern what your path is and your calling in life is, and you go towards those things, and the Lord will reveal those things to you and help you. But at the end of the day, and as you follow that, and as you follow your heart, I feel like He puts these things deep in our heart to give us kind of that map to guide us and where we go. And I think that as you follow that, then you start to see the plans unfold, and then you'll find, because you're doing things in the Spirit and the Holy Spirit is guiding you, then you'll see things start to work out for His glory. And then the ironic thing of the whole thing is then your parents will suddenly be proud, because it's exceeding what their expectations were. It's beyond their imagination, because they're God-sized dreams, not parental-sized dreams. And then they'll be proud. But when they're proud, you don't need it, right? You're not thriving on it. It's not a source of life for you. It's something that but it's a nice feeling, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, you just have to follow your heart in that sense. And if you're in the place that God wants you to be, you're going to grow, you're going to thrive, and you're going to do well according to His standards. Maybe not according to the world's standards, according to His. And you'll be building virtue. You'll be building good character. And that's where we want to be. Like I said before, if the goal is the grade, or the goal is the money or the status or the fame, people will cheat and do whatever it takes to get that. Or people will walk all over other people. They'll lose. They'll pick up vice in order to get that. Like, I think the scriptures say, where there is greed and selfish ambition, there will exist every vile practice. And that's part of it. If you're motivated by fame or greed or things like that, you'll find that the vices, that the sins creep in and destroy somebody from the inside out. But if you go and you're following your heart, and you're following in humility the life that God has for you, the opposite is there. You'll be building virtue, building character, and growing, and being an instrument of the Spirit wherever you go and whatever you do. And that's the goal. That's what we needed. That's where we need to be.
Right. I really like that, having God-sized dreams. I think is a good goal to have, especially in school, especially in college, when, like we mentioned before, there's a lot of different pressures going on, whether it's from the family or from just living in college, whether it's at home or, if you've moved away. And I think it's kind of hard sometimes for us to remember to keep it grounded in the faith, through Christ. Right. Everything that we do, I guess, is for that ultimate goal, especially even our degree, which we may not, correlate the two at sometimes when we're just so focused on education. But I do feel like there is always a higher purpose for any career path that we're chosen, right?
Yeah, almost all career paths, whatever you're doing, you do it for the glory of God. We need good Christian engineers. We need everything. A nurse who treats their job as a ministry is going to care for their patients in a way that is beyond what the minimum expectations are. They're really going to care for the needs of a person. And if you see that, and that goes with anything, and anything that you do, if you're held to that higher standard of doing what's right, of doing things in a way, as a Christian would do things, then it makes a difference in anything that you do. From the smallest task to the biggest task, we can glorify our Lord and our God by what we do.
Right. No, I think it's a great point. I think we've gone quite a bit over, I guess, the struggles that our students may face, dealing with their families, dealing with other pressures that they have. Hopefully we try to see a shift towards either a better way for us to handle it, because that pressure will always be there, right? I mean, not just in the Malayali culture, but parents will always be parents, always wanting the best. Right, and I think a lot of it is also for us to...
In one sense, it's a good thing, because they believe in you.
Right.
And we want them to... That's a good thing. We need people to believe in us. And again, like I said, it's a wonderful thing in our culture that we stress education. And that's a great thing. It's just a matter of that there is a line and where things can get overwhelmingly pressure versus building up, and launching somebody off, versus kind of knocking them down. And that's hard. It's hard to see the difference. And we make mistakes. We're all sinners. We all make mistakes and such, and we're all on this journey together. But the more we communicate, the better then I think we can be. I think it's a tough thing. I know, nobody's alone in this journey. You have the church, go sit and talk to your and go talk to people, mentors and people to kind of help you along those lines, to help see things from a different perspective, people to build you up. That's something that we all need around us. Like you said, we need that cheering squad. We need people in our corner who are building us up and helping us launch things out. We're more wholesome. None of us are alone in this struggle. We are the church,
Right.
Together. As we gather together, we build one another. We lift each other up in anything that we do.
Exactly.
So,
And it's good, as as much as we talk about parental pressures and all, it's very also interesting to see how a lot of times we might end up more like our parents than we might realize.
Yeah.
As much as we have to say about it now,
yeah,
I think there also comes a point where like, oh,
yeah,
they were right.
yeah.
Yeah.
As I raise my own kids and such, I start to see, I try, sometimes a lot of the things I try to emulate, the way my parents raised me, and try to do the best I can, given all that we know, and that's true. We have a different understanding as we get older and we grow and we see things from different perspectives and such. So, as long as it's coming from a place of love, everything is always going to be all right in the end.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I think that's a good place for us to wrap it up here. I'd like to thank you, Etchin, for taking time to talk about this.
It's been a joy for me. I love this. This is a wonderful thing. It's a great conversation to have. And I love that they're starting off into something wonderful.
And I want to say thank you to everyone who has been listening to this podcast. And I hope everyone continues to stay safe during this time of quarantining and social distancing. I know it's a tough time for all of us, especially within our community. Many of our loved ones work in the healthcare industry, so let us continue to keep them in our prayers. I hope all of you have a blessed end of the Great Lent, and please stay tuned for the next episode of Chaiyya Chats.